Welcome to windy Capetown. Behind me, they are wrapping up the Big Air Kite League competition. A lot of big tricks went down. I filmed the finals and semi-finals from both the men and women. And today, we are going to learn from the best.
Guess I let my feelings take control. Guess I let my demon take the wheel. Used to think that we be growing old. Now I can't believe that it was real. It was back in late December when I did it. I just wish I could forget.
Most people can only dream about these tricks, including me. I don't think I'll get back to a level where I will be able to land those tricks. But we can still learn from the takeoffs, the landings, the way people initiate rotations, and also the crashes. So let's dive in deeper straight away with the takeoff. In this video we can see Klein doing a kite loop laid back roll with a board off. And one thing you can notice when he takes off from the water is that he slowly steers his kite up towards 12 and he keeps it there for a short moment. And you want to keep your kite at 12 because that is where it is going to provide the most lift up. If you steer your kite over to the side already, the kite will not pull you straight up and you will not maximize your lift. So the key point is, keep your kite at 12 for a little while before you can use steering it to your next move. Let this be a kite loop or later on back for the landing. Jeremy Burlando isn't shy to go high, and you can see that in this kite loop laid back roll with a board off and extra rotation. On the takeoff you will see a lot of spray, and this is because he's carving in towards the wind. The more you carve towards the wind, the more apparent wind you generate and the more lift your kite provides. So it's very important to use these kickers here in Capetown. On flat water it's a little bit harder, but if you use the kicker in the right way, you can hold your edge for a lot longer during your carve. A general rule of thumb, the bigger your spray is on the takeoff, the higher your jump will be. If you want to do well in competition, it is very important that you land your tricks. But this is also true to us. I want to land my tricks. But if it's very windy, like it was in this Big Air Kite League stop in Capetown, it was about 30, gusting 40, or 30 to 40 knots, gusting even over the 40s. It is very important that your timing is perfect for your landing. As you'll see, most of these people land with a down loop. A down loop for me is the same as a heli loop. I'll touch on this maybe in a different video because this is kind of a hot topic. I think it's kind of Europe versus North America. But in this case, a down loop is a heli loop. It's just a loop to land softer. You do also have a kite loop and a contra loop, but the difference is that those are pulled on the way up towards the apex of your jump. A kite loop is pulled with your backhand, where contra loop is pulled with your front hand, and they have very different pulls. But enough about that. Let's look at some landings and how these boys and girls touch down softly. In this video you'll see Giel Vlugt doing a kite loop laid back roll with a board off, and I'm absolutely shocked how many kite loop board off rotation combinations there are now in the competition. You used to be able to win King of the Air with just a kite loop board off, but not anymore. Anyways, on his way down you will see that he does a very classic down loop. He steers his kite slightly over to the left towards 11:30 and then steers it right around 12 o'clock for the down loop, slowing him down and putting him on the ground softly. Next up we see Angely Bouillot doing a kite loop double back roll where she goes inverted on the second rotation. You can really notice the low riding speed on her landing, and this is something we all strive for. The slower you ride on your landing in those high winds, the easier it is to land. But there's a very special kite steering that you'll have to do for that. You can see that her kite flies very far behind her and she pulls a very wide radius around 12 o'clock. This really slows her down because when the kite is behind you, it will slow you down. Now let's talk about a wide radius for the loop versus a narrow or a small radius for the loop. When you steer a kite, you actually the kite will actually create less lift because you're kind of stalling or deflecting one side of the canopy and it's not flying at maximum speed anymore, you're slowing it down. The faster a kite flies, the more lift it generates. So it's actually in your best interest to keep your kite going at a high speed. And if I'm cranking the bar, making the kite turn on a dot, the kite will not have a lot of speed. So therefore it is actually better if you are able to make a very wide radius and hardly steering the kite. When you do that, the kite keeps its speed and therefore creates a lot of lift. But it's not always as easy as just doing it, but especially on the smaller kites, you will see that it helps to steer the kite really far over to one side of the wind window and make a big loop around 12. And this is something we can also see in this video from Jeremy Burlando with a kite loop laid back board off with an extra rotation. We've seen it already, but notice how the kite flies very far behind him to slow him down on the landing. His turning radius for the kite isn't that big, but he still lets the kite fly far behind him to slow him down after picking up all that speed from the loop. And that brings us to Cohan van Dijk, the winner of this Big Air Kite League stop. And as you can see with this trick, it's not a surprise that he won because he put down a massive performance. He lands this trick clean, but I still think there are a few points that he could have improved on. For instance, you can see that when he downloops, he actually downloops the kite early and the kite starts looping from 12 o'clock. Due to that, he maintains a lot of forward speed and he lands with a very, very high speed. What could he have improved? He could have steered his kite slightly to the left or right of 12 o'clock, let it fly further past 12 to slow down his forward speed and make a loop or a down loop with a very wide radius. This should have slowed him down and put him down a little bit softer, making for a cleaner landing. Let's have a closer look at this video from Klein that I showed you earlier. He pulls a down loop, but then decides to steer the kite the other way on the landing, creating an S shape in the sky. I sometimes do this because it is all about the kite positioning in the sky. If you come down and you're about to land, it doesn't make sense to pull a second down loop as your lines will kind of slack and your kite will do a funky thing. In those moments, it makes more sense to steer the kite the other way, back into the wind window and ride out with power and speed. Cohan van Dijk stomps some really high speed landings and this one is not an exception. You can see that he lands with a lot of speed, loses line tension and then his kite crashes into the water. What can you improve in such a moment? If you are following your kite on the landing, your lines will slack. You're following the wind, so basically there's not much wind left anymore for the kite to fly in. The best thing to do then is just go right or left and go back towards a crosswind course. Like that, the wind will come back in the kite, your lines will come up to tension and you will be able to steer the kite. This is something that can be quite hard though if you're landing with Mach 10 and in some choppy conditions, but that's basically it. You can loop all you want, but these competitors want to add rotations to their tricks. You can do that by taking off from the water and applying a rotation on your takeoff, but the other way is to use an external force, in this case the kite. When your kite loops, it creates power, and you can convert this power into a rotation if you make the right movements. Next to that, and this is something a lot of people don't realize, but the way that the wind hits your body or your board can also put you in a rotation. If you want to change the direction of a rotation, this will have to be done with most likely head movements or body movements, and that is something we're going to look at closer. This move from Jason van der Spuy has it all. A rotation on the takeoff, a direction change on the loop through a head movement, and an added rotation on the way down, where the down loop actually pulls him into another rotation. Another good example of this can be found in this video from Jeremy Burlando where he does it, and this trick is still very high on my list, but yeah, I haven't figured it out yet. I know the theory, but as you might know, you can know the theory but not put it into practice. During this doobie board off from Giel Vlugt, you can really see how he looks down on the second rotation in order to go more inverted on the board off. Your body will follow your head, so if I throw my head forwards or backwards, my body will follow. Crashes. I think they're a big part of kiteboarding and an essential part for your progression curve. If you don't crash, most likely you're not trying and therefore not progressing. I would even argue that you can learn more from a trick that you crash than from a trick that you landed clean. So let's have a look at a couple of crashes and see what we can learn. This was the first double loop I've seen Angely Bouillot trying, and I was shitting my pants for her because she is in super shallow water. Just listen to the audio. Don't do it there.
1, 2.
Oh, don't do it there. When you do your tricks in shallow water, there is a very high chance that you crash. And when you crash in shallow water, there's a high chance that you break stuff. So stay away from the shallow water and just stick to the deeper end. Have you ever had a monster wave in front of you and not being able to jump over it anymore? Just go on there like Cohan. 99% of the time, it is way better to turn around though. Even though that this is a possibility, your timing needs to be perfect, otherwise you just get smacked in the face. Sometimes your feet just stick to the straps, like you can see in this loop from Giel Vlugt. The key point is not to stress out and focus on your kite steering. If you focus on your kite steering for the landing and you do that right, you are gonna have more time to fix the problem that surrounds your feet. You can either kick the board off or you can put your strap back on depending on your level, but have a look at the kite and make sure you come down slowly because that is going to be your rescue. Towards the final of the competition, the wind was dying off a little bit, but the stakes were still very high. So you can see Cohan van Dijk going for a double loop laid back and crashing it quite badly. He decides to kick the board off just before the landing as he's coming down with so much speed. This is obviously better than landing on your board, because if you land on your board with such high speed, most likely you will break both ankles and who knows what more. But there is also the option to land on your butt. This is probably going to end up with some bruising and a small chance of twisting an ankle. In the end, it's up to you to decide. Can I get both feet out of the board? Then kicking the board off is definitely an option. If you don't think you'll be able to get both feet out of the board, landing on your butt might be the better one. Just make sure it's not shallow, but you should have taken care of that before. Double loops are here to stay after Giel Vlugt properly introduced them last season in Capetown. The female riders wrote history at this Big Air Kite League competition after Francesca Maini pulled the first ever double loop in competition. Huge congrats to Francesca Maini and Angely Bouillot for pulling this off. It is such an achievement to pull double loop. I'm very scared of it, but let's have a closer look at some of these amazing loops. For a short moment I thought this guy was part of the comp, being on such a small kite and going for doubles. But no, these guys are. Here we go, Jason, come on, throw a double for me. One thing I really noticed in the comp is to change to smaller kites in order to do a double. Where most of the riders will be on an 8 or 9 meter kite for their tricks, they switch down to a 6 or 7 meter kite, which makes going high a lot harder. But when they get the height, you can see that the small kite doesn't create much pull due to the short turning radius. Less pull forward equals more wind in the kite on the way down, making for a quicker recovery, which you definitely want when you pull a double. In this clip, you can see Francesca Maini landing her second double loop in the final after taking the win in the semi-final with the same trick. Angely Bouillot followed shortly after, and as you can hear, we are quite stoked that she landed it.
There we go, that one. Come on.
Yeah, Angely!
That was big.
Nice. Well done.
That second loop.
And with this banger, we get to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed this new format. It is definitely something I want to try more often. If you did, give me a like, comment if you have any questions, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. There's a lot of tutorials coming, so stay tuned. See you on the next one.